Hi there. So this excited little bundle of energy is me having a dopamine rush because of new stationery.
Das ist schon sehr schön. Guck mal, wie es aussieht. Beautiful. Muss ein zweites davon kaufen.
I bought a couple of journals and materials off of Notebook Therapy to start off my little journaling journey. And the first video on this channel, at least officially, will be about my reading journal. I thought I could make a video that's like 100% cozy, but that's not quite me. I'm a critical person who's 2 parts chaotic and 1 part sleepy cat. I don't know what I was thinking or drinking while I was writing the script. We're just going to go with it. I was going to say kitten just now, but I don't want to infantilize myself. The video's doing enough on that front already, I suppose. Before I start, I guess I should say a couple of words about myself. My name is Simone. I'm a writer and a translator, and I've always been interested in media and media criticism, though I've not always been particularly public about it. This is probably not the best introductory video. It relies too much on stuff. I do like stuff, but I am also conscious of over-consuming in other areas. Not so much when it comes to cute stationery articles, as you can see here. These are from the Hinoki line from Notebook Therapy. I do think that their journals are quite good, but the one that I'll be using here
Oh nein, jetzt ist es an der Seite. Scheiße. Okay.
Is actually from a company called Ottergami. And as you can see here, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm chaotically setting up my journal. What this YouTube channel will be about primarily is more about the media criticism side of things. So I don't know how regularly I'll be showing you things from my journal. Here you can see me using some washi tape I think I got off of Amazon. I'm trying to make a title page of sorts. And as far as media criticism is concerned, I have one regular ongoing series. That's the one on dark academia.
Ist gerissen. Nee, das ist kacke.
And there are 3 videos in that series already. Now for the reading journal, I'm going to be showing you the setup, but I'll also be showing you the books that I read in January of 2024.
Das ist kacke geworden und dann habe ich das aber schon angefangen zu malen. Dann habe ich hier ganz viel Scheiß drauf geklebt, aber das sah scheiße aus. Dann habe ich das so rausgenommen. Und jetzt habe ich hier eine Dutch Door. Dutch Door. So, jetzt müssen wir diesen Bullshit hier covern.
Okay, so you should definitely not be throwing scissors like that. The theme of the journal I decided on as a whole was like my magical reading library kind of thing. I'm not too sure how well it turned out, but I'm quite happy with it. It was my first attempt at this sort of thing. I did get inspired by other people setting up their journals, but I more or less just did what felt natural and right to me. And in the setup of this journal, the one thing that I'll have, aside from all of the spreads you can find in other journals, which is kind of like a reading tracker, I've got a couple of title pages as well, and did not finish, and so on, is a language tracker. So that's, I guess, for me, one of the more important pages is to track what languages I read in. And here you can see me putting together my January title page. I don't really think you need a title page, I'm sorry, for these type of journals. It's just something that you can do once you've started, and if you're a little bit like me, it feels like you kind of have to do it, but that's not the case at all. And as I said, for January I read 4 books, but 2 of those are picture books, so I'm counting them as one book. And the first one, and the one you can see me sitting up here, is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is also the first book I review in the Critical Dark Academia series. I have a lot of video material setting up this spread, and you can see me setting up a little Dutch door there, and they're just the title, and it's quite simple really, but I do have a little drawing, like a secret drawing just beyond that Dutch door, and a quote, and then a short summary of my thoughts on the book. And I used a couple of stickers, and I printed out the cover page, and I think I also used 2 of the Art Deco stickers that I got in an Art Deco set off of Amazon as well, and some washi tape by Paper Monogatari, I believe. Paper Monogatari is like if you're really into journaling and all of that, that's a very aesthetic place to look at very well constructed videos, which is not exactly what you'll be getting here, I suppose. So since I already reviewed The Secret History, what I'm going to be doing now is actually reviewing or talking about the second book that's in here. So I read primarily in German and in English, and so I read 1 book in German, the 2 picture books were in English, and then The Secret History was in English as well. I often listen to audiobooks because it's just more convenient for me, and oftentimes I have headaches and the like, and then lying in bed and listening to audiobooks is just better, and I've learned that that counts as reading as well, so I'm good with that. But I did have a physical copy of the German book that I read, which is actually a reread because I already read the final draft of the book before it came out, and that's Weiße Flecken, which means white spots, by Lena Albrecht, which is about the colonial history of Germany, so the German colonial history in Togo. And there are far too few books that deal with German colonial history and, you know, the history of colonialism in African countries that were colonized by Germany, which is something that in Germany people don't talk about very often because the focus as far as history goes is oftentimes on the Holocaust, and that leads to some confusing political stances, to say the least. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, at least. At some point I probably will. I don't know when to shut up. That's one of my main problems, I guess. The book that I wrote, my first novel, dealt with colonialism in an African country as well, to an extent, although that was like more of an autobiographical approach, or an attempt at figuring out or reconstructing, I should rather say, a collective family history. There are very few books that deal with that type of thing. In Lena's case, she's a white person, and full disclosure, I did moderate her book vernissage. She's a white person, but there might have been a black person, a black great-grandmother in her family history, and she researched that for the purposes of this book, but a lot of the book is based on stories and rumors as well. And then the first part is about this woman going to Togo to conduct interviews with the people there, and particularly people who've been refugees to Germany but who've been denied asylum ultimately and had to go back to Togo and are now living there and can't actually go back to Germany, but they can't really rebuild their life in Togo either. So I think it's quite an interesting book. And the other 2 books that I read were Noticing and Trying, which are 2 children's books and picture books really, but they have a very lovely, outlook on life, and they have a very interesting story, and they are beautifully illustrated. I'm just going to wait for that part in the video to actually be able to tell you the names of both the writer and the illustrator for that book series. Circling back to The Secret History. The Secret History is a book that I think I would have enjoyed even more if I were a little bit younger and didn't know that much about colonial and post-colonial history and structures and, hierarchies in general, and how they favor particular stories over others. I still think the book is very well written, but it is important to note that there are some aspects in it that are both racist and homophobic, and that's something that I discuss in a bit more detail in the video proper. Now, the reason for doing a Dark Academia series, even though Dark Academia is more or less in its last throes, I would say, as far as popularity is concerned, is that I think it's a very interesting gateway, or it's been a very interesting gateway into a lot of other subcultures and a lot of the ways that certain types of people, oftentimes people who are very interested in this sort of academic tradition, conduct themselves and interact with the world and so on. Now, if you're listening to me, you will have noticed that I sometimes struggle a little bit finding words in English, and that's because I'm bilingual, and the way that bilingualism actually works is that you always have one language that is more dominant than the other, depending on the circumstances that you're in. So if I were to go to a predominantly English-speaking country for a couple of months, my dominance in the 2 languages, since I'm a fairly balanced bilingual, would shift. And that's quite interesting to note. And I'm thinking of this because in The Secret History, languages also play a major role, both the way that the students express themselves, but also just in the way that language is used as a shorthand for intelligence or academic prowess, and what types of language are used to that effect. And I think that that's actually extremely interesting and something that I would like to look at in a bit more detail the further I get into the series. With journaling in general, it's just something that I want to try, but I'm not pressuring myself too much on this, right? So I'm not sure I'm going to keep the structure of having a spread for each month. I've started doing that, but I'm not sure whether or not I can keep it up, and it's not that important to me to keep it up either. I'm currently reading a couple of books. I also finished a couple of books in the meantime. So the one is Razorblade Tears, which is quite interesting. It has a very different language from The Secret History, and it's super easy to follow along with. And it's a thriller about 2 fathers who are both ex-convicts, and they are trying to find out who killed their sons, who were married to one another, and they're dealing with the fact that while their sons were alive, they weren't able to connect with them due to homophobic tendencies that they both had, and also due to their hypermasculine and maybe toxic upbringing that they both had. And it's not trying to be especially literary in a way, so it's not trying to be super deep or anything like that. It's trying to engage with the topics fairly head on, and it's very honest, and I like it quite a lot actually, and I can relate to it and I connect to it quite a lot. I've also started Delicious Monsters by Liesl Sambury, which is a black-lid sort of horror story, and so far it's quite interesting and quite good, but I'm just on the first couple of pages. Then I've also started You Only Call When You're in Trouble by Stephen McCauley, which is an interesting character study about this young professor who is under investigation for sexual harassment, but it turns out in flashbacks, etc., that the situation is a bit more complicated, and it reminded me a lot of working at university myself back in the day and the weird intricacies that go with that. But she goes to live with her uncle, who's taken care of her all of her life because her mother is a more unstable person, let's say. She's not abusive, or at least not physically or emotionally abusive, but she's very self-involved, the mother, and she's never been much of a caretaker. And so it forced her brother, the protagonist's uncle, who is basically the main protagonist, to take care of this person all of her life. I wouldn't have thought that I'd like this book as much as I've been liking it so far. And I'm hoping it'll stay as engaging as it is. There's not much happening in it. It's just really a pure character study in that one. And then, of course, I've been watching a couple of TV shows as well. So I'm currently finishing The Last of Us based on the video game with a couple of friends. And then we also finished a couple of TV shows recently, the most interesting of which would be the new True Detective season, so Night Country, which I really want to talk about either in a video, or maybe I'm going to just set up a media journal as well. I also would really like to talk about a series I finished last year, which is Sharp Objects, which I also thought was really, really good. And all of those series are interesting for a variety of different reasons. And then I also finished Atlanta recently. And I also want to talk about Rummy, which is just to me one of the most interesting series I've watched in a long time. Yeah, so here are the final results. And here I'm just giving you sort of a flip through of the reading journal. I think most of these spreads are fairly self-explanatory. And here you can see my ratings. So I gave White Spots 5 stars, Donna Tarsa's Secret History I gave 3 stars. And then here you can see my little secret flap. So if you've read the book, you know what happens there. And then I gave 4 stars to the 2 picture books. That's the video. Thank you for joining me on this first endeavor. It's been a chatty little video, just talking about what I'm planning to do with the channel as a whole and what's going to happen in the future. And I hope you enjoyed this little bit of time we spent together. The next couple of videos will have more of a narrative structure if you're more into that kind of thing. Bye bye. See you soon.